Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We are very excited to be hosting our Pass the Polluters Pay Climate Superfund. And with that, I just want to go ahead and introduce Woody Hastings, who is Climate Center staff here. And Woody, take it away.
Thank you so much, Mark, and good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. I am going to share my screen and just do a few opening slides, a little housekeeping and such. Hopefully everybody can see my screen. Just to make sure you're on the right bus today, we are here for our webinar, Why California Needs the Polluters Pay Climate Superfund. I'll be your moderator today, and I am the Phase Out Polluting Fuels Program Director for the Climate Center, and we're joined today by Assemblymember Don Addis of the 30th Assembly District, Jason Feifel of the Center for Biological Diversity, Claire Brown, PhD of UC Berkeley, and Council President Joe LaCava of the City of San Diego. A little bit about the Climate Center. I know a lot of you folks on the webinar today have joined our webinars in the past or are familiar with us, but maybe some of you, it's your first time. Welcome aboard. Really happy to have you here. Happy to have everyone here this morning. Um, Climate Center is a nonprofit, California statewide nonprofit founded in 2001 in Sonoma County. Our mission is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions rapidly everywhere, starting in California. We believe in thriving, healthy communities. We envision a future where everyone in California enjoys clean air, clean water, renewable, reliable energy, healthy food, thriving nature, and more. That's a photo there of our staff and our board. So we're a small but mighty team. I do want to share a sincere thanks to our generous sponsors. I'm not going to read them all off, but hopefully you can sort of see who they are there. I don't want to spend too much time on my intro because we have Assemblymember Don Addis with us this morning only for a short time. And so I do want to give her as much time as possible, and we're going to open up for some questions and discussion, from you all um, before she departs. And our promotional partners, thanks so much for helping get the word out. These are our promotional partners. Um, every single webinar we do, we have a call to action. The call to action today is to urge your state representative to support AB 1243 and SB 684, the Polluters Pay Climate Superfund legislation that is currently making its way through the legislature. It is a top priority for the Climate Center. There's a couple ways you can access the action where you can take action. Scan that QR code there. Um, or we have one of our webinar team members dropping the link into the chat for you. Um, I do want to also mention before that's so there's that QR code if you want to grab that now. I'm going to stop my screen share in a moment. And I do want to hand it off as early as possible to Assemblymember Addis to offer her thoughts. Thanks so much again for being here, Assemblymember. And yeah, if you could share with us, oh, the thing I wanted to mention, one moment, to folks, housekeeping kind of thing. For questions, you can enter your questions at any time in the Q&A function. That's where we would prefer that you do that. Anytime throughout the webinar, we will open up after Assemblymember Addis's comments for a small Q&A session. And then at the very end of the webinar, we'll open it up again for questions for the rest of the presenters. So without any further ado, I would like to hand it off to you, Assembly Member, and please share with us sort of your inspiration, your motivation maybe for why you have introduced this legislation and how you think it's important, as we all do, for the state of California to move forward on addressing the climate crisis and having the responsible parties pay for it, right? Thank you so much again.
Thank you so much, Woody. And it's wonderful to be here. It is no surprise that the Climate Center would have been started in a place like Sonoma that's so gorgeous. And we can see in your background, and folks may not know, but I actually represent 20% of California's coastline from the Santa Cruz Harbor down to southern San Luis Obispo. So much of my impetus for bringing this legislation has to do with the place that I represent, which is coastal California. And I'm so glad you've got another coastal elected here, because so much of our population in California lives at the coast. Worldwide, so much of the population lives at the coast, and that's where we're feeling some of the largest climate effects. And I want to say thank you to the Climate Center just for all of the work that you do, and take us back to last year a little bit when we passed 3233, which was one of the largest oil bills to get across the line last year, when we took on big oil and gave power back to the people in California to be able to make decisions around oil and gas. But one of the reasons that I did that harkens back to the 2023 atmospheric rivers that hit the Central Coast and all of California incredibly hard. And what has been said time and again is that the climate crisis isn't just an environmental crisis, it is a financial crisis. And so I had just been sworn in December, just started my first few days in office in January of 2023. And all of the sudden came some of the largest floods that we had seen ever in history. And I went and visited 20 locations across my district and into people's homes, and literally had to put on boots to walk through the mud or the floodwaters that were invading people's homes from this climate disaster. And I knew that there was no way to not take action. We fast forward 2 years to the January 2025 fires in Los Angeles, some of the largest and most expensive wildfires that our nation has ever seen. And the devastation has been heartbreaking. And once again, we see that the climate crisis is a financial crisis for not just the people that are affected, but the entire state of California. I'm sure, like many of you, I recently got an email from an insurance broker near me who said, take notice, your insurance rates are probably about to go up because of what we are going to all be paying for the FAIR plan to keep paying for these climate disasters. So it's very clear to me that the taxpayers of California have not just been footing the bill for the climate crisis when it comes to trying to build the projects that can put us in more mode of resilience, but also the recovery. On top of all that, we have been subsidizing big oil for decades. Big oil knew for decades that they were creating the climate crisis. It has been verified since at least the 1990s that the climate crisis is human created and attributed to the biggest polluters. So we need help. The reality is, regular people, everyday taxpayers cannot continue to keep footing these bills on our own. We have to have oil come to the table to help us with the kinds of things that we're dealing with. Everyday people are paying more to cool and heat their homes. They're paying to evacuate and rebuild from disaster. They're paying for medical care, for pollution-related illness. They're paying for the costs of recovery that I just described. And they want to be in prevention mode, such as home hardening, but just can no longer afford to do this while oil companies are getting off scot-free. So that's the impetus for bringing the bill. I'm very, very proud to do this alongside Senator Menjivar, who started this effort last year. We have two sister bills, I'll say, moving through the Senate and moving through the Assembly to bring oil companies to the table to assess fees for damages that they caused in California during a certain time period, 1990 to 2024. It's a very small group of polluters, but they're the mega polluters who have been given trillions in subsidies globally, and we need to have them pay their fair share.
You're here.
I'm here. I'll just, I'm going to grab a cough drop, but happy to do questions.
Well said. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that you had completed your opening thoughts and comments there.
Yes, yes. I just wanted to pause there and say we need them to pay their fair share, and
I
happy to open to questions.
We agree. And when you're looking for money, maybe you should look where it is, because haven't we, isn't it true that the oil and gas industry, fossil fuel industry has been making year over year record profits in the billions and billions of dollars? And they use a lot of that money to continue to lobby and to influence the legislature. They don't use those.
35 million last year, Woody. When you
Right.
mentioned they are making money and paying for lobbying, 35 million last
It,
year for lobbying, trying to kill all the oil bills, but we were successful.
Right. Well, kill all the common sense climate and clean energy and clean transportation bills, right? I mean, we see that left and right, and it's just it's not okay, and we need the responsible parties to be paying something. I have a question for you. I want to kick off with, which is that putting this into the context a little bit in some of the curveballs, shall we say, that are coming our way. One of them is some announcements of refinery closures. And we are hearing from some of our friends in the legislature that there's serious concern about impinging on the oil industry now when they're going through some kind of the spin is that they're white knuckling it, or that there are problems, or that they're being forced out of California, um, and that there's fear about doing anything about putting more impositions on the oil industry now. We know that they are still raking in huge profits, and closing refineries does not necessarily mean that that they're not a profitable industry. They've got global assets and that kind of thing. What's your take on the vibe in the Capitol around the members' sentiment on that? Is that true? And is there some spin that needs to be unspun?
Yes. So a lot of dollars have been put into this story that we can't regulate the industry any more than we have, or we're going to force them to close. Number one, oil is not leaving California. I will remind all of us that the Sable Pipeline and Santa Barbara offshore oil platforms are back online. They came back online on the anniversary of the Gaviota oil spill, 10 years after the Gaviota oil spill. So oil is coming back in California, and that's real. We also know that we have a president who is on the side of oil, who has received billions, millions, if not billions of dollars in campaign contributions from oil, and has said, "Bill, drill, baby, drill." So oil has the federal government on its side, at least the executive branch on its side, and oil is expanding in California right now today as we speak, something I think none of us thought that we would see again. Oil drilling coming back online off the coast of California, but that's the reality that we're living in. So a lot of time and money has been spent to sort of push this story forward, that somehow if we ask oil to come to the table after giving them trillions of dollars of subsidies, that we are somehow going to hurt them. And I would remind people, it's regular everyday people that are hurting right now. We are unable to afford the cost of the climate crisis at the same time that California is facing a $12 billion budget deficit. And largely, the state is not going to be able to pay for the kinds of things that we've paid for in the past. And it's time for oil to pay their fair share, frankly. And so, yes, we do need to turn the tides on that story, share fact-based information, and make sure that legislators across California are hearing from their constituents on this.
Very good, thank you. Yes, and the call to action, I saw some questions in the Q&A about what can we do. We have our call to action that folks can click on today, and I'm going to mention that a couple more times. Is there anything else, a few questions about what can we do? So like grassroots groups, individuals, organizations, things like that. Any other suggestions about what folks can do?
I mean, look, we got the bill out of its first committee. We are still in conversations on both sides in the Senate and the Assembly when it comes to its next committee. Both bills are in the judiciary committees right now, and members need to hear from their constituents on what kinds of things you are facing when it comes to the climate crisis and the financial crisis. What is the climate crisis doing to your pocketbook day in and day out? How are your insurance rates changing? Have you faced damages from wildfires or floods or asthma because the air quality or any a host of other things that are happening? I think it's important for legislators to hear your real stories and to activate your networks. I see an amazing number of people on here on this webinar, over 150 people on this webinar. And imagine if you each talk to 5 people who talk to 5 people. So, it really, those personal stories matter, and getting in with your legislators matters.
Very true, very true. Couple questions here about your engagement with, relationship to BIPOC, Black, Indigenous people of color, so the EJ communities, and also labor. Labor is a big, important part of the we're in a transition, right, away from fossil fuels into a new clean energy economy. And I see the Polluters Pay Climate Superfund policy as a part of that picture, a means of funding the transition, funding the resilience and resources that we need. Can you say anything about your outreach and interactions with the environmental justice communities and the who are hit, the hardest and have the least ability to cope, and the labor community?
Yes, so I have a very close relationship with the environmental justice communities. They were very supportive of our oil bill last year, and this year we've had some really phenomenal conversations. There's huge champions of this bill. 40% of the funds that would come from the fees that the largest producers, the largest polluters, and the largest profiters would pay, 40% of that pot of money would go to frontline, most impacted communities. And that's by design, because these communities have borne the brunt of oil for far too long and borne the brunt of the crises and continue to bear the brunt of the climate crises in impacted communities, frontline communities, for too long. And so we are working in synergy, and I'm very, very proud to be able to do that. You also mentioned labor. So we have labor support for this bill. We have nurses and doctors and other kinds of labor groups that are supporting the bill. We know that we need the high-paying living wage jobs of the future. And part of the way this bill is structured is that cities and counties, municipal agencies that are required to pay living wage, what's called prevailing wage, when they do infrastructure projects, many of which have project labor agreements, can access these funds to be able to do the kinds of infrastructure projects that are needed, including electrification types of projects.
Very good, very good. Let's see. Oh, so there was a question. Oh, I like this one from Eugenie Lewis. Um, what can you say about how the connections are made? How you connect the dots between what the fossil fuel industry's pollution has been and the actual climate impacts, the climate calamities we experience? I know that gets in sort of into the science and technical stuff a little bit, attribution science, they call it, right? Can you speak to that a little bit?
It's a very smart question, and I'm glad it was asked. And yes, it has to do with something called attribution science. And it's the way that you assess through modeling what would have happened had these companies not produced the GHG gases, not caused the climate pollution that they've caused in a certain area. You use modeling to sort of figure out the before and after effects. And I should say that kinds of companies that this bill would address are those that produced 1 billion metric tons of GHG over that period from 1990 to 2024. It looks at were they operating in California and did they cause damages in California? And that's where we've tasked Cal EPA to figure those things out. And the most common way to do that is through that attribution science. And it's sort of like with lead poisoning or other Superfund kind of legislation that we have, where you have an area that wasn't polluted, an industry operated there. Now that area is polluted, and you're able to draw the direct conclusion. Attribution science would use modeling to be able to take a backwards look at this.
Very good, very good. Yes, thank you. Yeah, and you mentioned the sort of the existing, this legislation is modeled on long-standing toxic Superfund type legislation that's existed for decades at the federal level, and you can connect the dots
Yeah.
between the sources of the problem and the impact. So it is doable, folks. Um, there's a couple questions that are coming up that are really going to be addressed, I think, in more depth later by Dr. Brown and by Jason Feifel. Um, one of them is this biggie. It's sort of an FAQ, right? The one around how are we going to avoid the oil industry just passing along those costs through to the customers, and so we'll see prices go up at the pump. Is there anything you'd like to say to that? And again, Dr. Brown's going to be unpacking that a lot more for us later on in the webinar.
Well, I'll defer to Dr. Brown's more detailed approach to this, to explaining this, but similar, I don't know if folks will remember, we were in special session, not earlier this year, but earlier last year around oil and gas pricing and oil and gas gouging. We went into a special session called SBX 1-2, and we put certain parameters around refineries and how much storage they need to have, and put a provision in that bill that you can't pass those costs on to customers. We have that provision in this bill. Additionally, the way that this is structured and the way these oil and gas companies operate, and the fixed nature of the fee, that this should not be passed on to customers. The way that this whole thing is structured, who we're looking at, their global operations, and how the fees are assessed. These are one-time fees. They're not ongoing, so they wouldn't be passed on to the consumer.
Very good. Can you get to a practical question here? And I think that, again, Jason Feifel from Center for Biological Diversity will be talking a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of where the bill is at and sort of what some of the campaign activities are. But the bill is currently in the Judiciary Committee. Is there anything you can say about your thoughts about what would be helpful to move the bill out of the Judiciary Committee?
I think back to those personal stories. So when I talk to people about my experience in the 2023 storms, and I described to folks meeting with a family whose home had been flooded and literally pulling on those rain boots and walking through almost knee-high water in their living room, and the devastation, and having the mom, cry on my shoulder about how hard this was for her family. It's stories of what's happened to real people in your communities and in the communities of the legislators that are on the committee that represent your communities, having them really understand what you have faced when it comes to climate crisis and the impending financial crisis that has occurred. I think it makes a big difference for folks. The Climate Center has been such a leader in advocating and talking to all of the legislators up here, but there is nothing like hearing from real people about their needs for change, and from tax-paying individuals about their need for change.
And that's to their own representatives, and then maybe at some point we can drop the link into the chat, Mark, if you can pull it up, of the Judiciary Committee and who those members are, because it's in the Judiciary Committee right now. So I would think that we would want to get messages to those committee members. And I know, and Jason can maybe touch on some of the key ones there that need to be inspired. We're down to our last few minutes of your participation here, and so much appreciate you being here. Fantastic. So with just a couple minutes left, maybe I'll just, there are lots of questions have come in. So folks, I'm sorry, we can't get to all your questions. Maybe we can get to them later in the webinar, but Assemblymember Addis, any sort of closing thoughts, comments?
Well, look, I mean, these are very trying times when we think about, everything that is happening across our globe. But this is exactly the time for us to lean in to these kinds of issues. And I'll just reiterate, we have a president who is attacking not just California's people and values, but California's environment, and more devastatingly, California's economy, with erratic policies, with out of control tariffs, with a view that it's okay for the stock market to be all over the place. But the fact that he is leaning in to worsening the climate crisis at this moment by saying drill baby drill, and then suing other states who have brought their own climate superfund laws to be. And I'll remind all of us that New York has passed a climate superfund law. Vermont has passed a climate superfund law. So other states have gotten ahead of California in terms of being leaders. The president is now suing them. So it's really up to us to carry this torch, to fight this fight, to be committed like we have never been committed to before, and to keep pressing forward, because we know this is what's right for our communities right now, and it's right for our communities in the future. And our pocketbooks just can't withstand this anymore without oil paying their fair share.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And I think it is 10:30, so I'm going to just really extend our gratitude for your participation today. And yeah, thank you so much for being on.
It's wonderful to see everyone, and thank you so much.
Okay, and I am now going to try to pull back up my slides. Can folks see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Very good. All right. So I'm going to give just a little bit more about the Climate Center's flagship campaign, Climate Safe California. It's a campaign that has substantive underpinnings. We've got a pathways document that was put together by Dr. Dan Kamen at UC Berkeley that shows how we can get to net negative emissions in California and be able to be actually, net negative, carbon positive, on a path that we need to be in line with the climate science. So that's Climate Safe California. And that's something that you can endorse. And if, Mark, you could drop the endorsement link for Climate Safe California, this would be a good time to do that. If you folks on the call have not endorsed Climate Safe California, please do. I don't know the number at this point. The last time I think I heard it was something around 2,500 uh, uh, organizations, labor, business, academia have signed on to, climate scientists have signed on to Climate Safe California. The Climate Safe California campaign and all of the work that the Climate Center does abides by three guiding principles. Number one is follow the latest science and the latest climate science, and also to secure a truly just transition for fossil fuel workers, their families, and the communities in which they live, so that they're not left in the lurch when we transition to the clean economy. And also to prioritize climate justice for the frontline communities that are hitting first and worst by this expanding crisis. It's not getting better yet, folks. It's going in the wrong direction. So that needs to be part of the priority. Everyone needs to be able to be protected and made safe and whole. So climate justice is an important part of what we do embrace with our work. There are four pillars: phasing out fossil fuels, scaling up carbon drawdown, and we prioritize natural and working lands carbon drawdown methods, climate smart farming, things like that. We push for community energy resilience, clean, resilient, affordable energy for all, and then we work to figure out ways like Polluters Pay Climate Superfund to fund the massive programs, statewide programs that we need. So that's a big part of it too. I don't think I need to go into this in great detail for folks. I think most people on this call are probably aware that tipping points are being reached around the globe. You connect the dots. It might be a pleasant day here today in Sonoma County, where I am, or wherever you are in California. Maybe it's nice, right? But something calamitous is going on just about anywhere in the world any given day. Certainly at the poles, Arctic sea ice vanishing, the Greenland ice sheet melting, coral reefs, permafrost thawing, wildfires everywhere, extreme heat episodes all over the place. So, it's a compounding crisis that has health impacts, economic impacts, environmental and ecological impacts. So, I think that this imposes the sense of urgency on what we're doing here. And yeah, so here in California, we're experiencing, let me get this out of the way, air pollution, not just from it's from the associated compounds, toxics that are emitted into the air with a lot of the industries that we need to regulate, extreme heat killing people. Um, in 2017, we had the Tubbs fire here in Sonoma County, and that wiped out 6,000 homes, and people were choking on the smoke. We've got people living near oil and gas extraction and refineries, and it's time to phase out this industry that has been a plague throughout the 20th century. And we've got new opportunities, so we should embrace the transition and move forward. Why isn't it not moving now? Also, just the influence from the oil industry. We talked. Assemblymember Addis talked about this a little bit. Record amounts spent on lobby in California to crush common sense climate and clean energy legislation. So, it's the opposite of what they should be doing. They should be funding the transition. They should be investing in alternatives, things like that. And we know that delaying action on the climate costs us more in healthcare, and we've heard as much as 275 billion in economic and other damages from the Southern California fires earlier this year. So, again, and so she also mentioned that Vermont and New York have already enacted this legislation. But you know, California is a leader. It's the fourth largest economy in the world. If it was its own nation, it's the fourth largest economy. And people pay attention when California does stuff. So even though we might not be first to adopt this legislation, if we do it, it'll make a big difference. It'll make waves. Other states, other nations will take a look at that and hopefully will follow. So we need to lead. Once again, this is your opportunity to take the action. Mark, if you'll drop that link into the chat, and that's the QR code. You can click on that with your phone, and that'll bring you right to the action page to alert your legislator, your representative, that you want them to support the Polluters Pay Climate Superfund legislation, SB 684 and AB 1243. I'm going to stop sharing, and I am going to ask Jason Feifel of the Center for Biological Diversity to join us. And Jason, Jason is with the Center for Biological Diversity. He works with the Climate Law Institute to fight pollution from oil and gas extraction. Prior to joining the center, he led CalPERG's advocacy and policy work on public health issues like getting lead out of school drinking water and stopping antibiotic overuse on factory farms. He holds a doctorate in political science from the University of California at UC Santa Barbara. And please share with us, Jason, if you will, Center for Biological Diversity's, a sponsor of the bill, and your reasons for sponsoring the bill, and what your view is of where it's at and what can be done to move it forward.
Yeah, thank you so much, Woody, for the introduction. So glad to be here with all of you today. Seeing a lot of supporters of this bill on the webinar, which is amazing. Thank you for the support. Mark, if you don't mind sharing my slides, I can dig in. I'll just start by saying the Center for Biological Diversity is one of the sponsoring organizations of this bill. We view it as an absolutely critical measure to ensure that the largest fossil fuel companies are paying for the climate damage that they have caused in California. From week to week, we're seeing more and more urgency around the need for this bill. And I think that was really underscored last week when we all got news that California is facing a $12 billion deficit. Budget cuts threaten critical health and public services, as well as many of the programs that we need for a sustainable and affordable transition away from fossil fuels and to a safe, climate resilient future. And we know that in California, the budget problem is likely to get worse because the latest budget projections and the proposal that we saw from the governor's office does not include potential federal cuts or the impact of tariffs on our budget outlook here in California. And the Climate Superfund Act would be a huge, massive help for dealing with the budget crisis that we're facing here in California. It would provide a new source of revenue that can help fill some of these budget holes. In terms of scale, it could bring in $150 billion or more in revenue. We saw a similar law passed in New York last year, which Woody already mentioned, and Assemblymember Addis mentioned. That was projected to bring in $75 billion. With the Superfund law here in California, $150 billion or more in revenue could be raised over the next 2 decades without any new taxes on the public. And this special fund is just absolutely critical because it would directly address the soaring climate costs that are hammering state and local budgets and communities across the state. We've already, everyone knows about the LA fires. Those alone cost an estimated $275 billion in property damage, healthcare, emergency response, and economic losses. And without a climate superfund in place, taxpayers will be on the hook to bear these rising costs, all while the fossil fuel companies responsible for the climate crisis continue to profit. And so that's why we need to get this done. The Climate Superfund allows California to protect taxpayers and the budget by recovering billions in expenditures tied to climate impacts like wildfire protection and flood recovery. And I really can't stress enough just how urgently this is needed, the special fund is needed to address the state's budget problem. I know that folks on this webinar know vital programs like Medi-Cal and in-home support services are facing cuts in the current budget proposal. And these are programs that Californians rely on and can be a matter of life and death. And then in the governor's revised budget, we're also seeing that there could be reduced GGRF funding for clean vehicle and public transit programs, community solar, and local fire prevention grants, just to name a few. And these are all critical projects that the Climate Superfund would bring in money for. And, again, it's just a testament to why this is so needed right now when California is dealing with this budget problem. Next slide. So the good news is that we have a common sense solution in the Climate Superfund, and it's overwhelmingly popular. Californians strongly support making polluters pay. 70% of likely California voters support a Climate Superfund to hold fossil fuel companies accountable. 69% said that they would be more likely to support a candidate who prioritizes this kind of policy. You see the polling information here. This was a poll done by Fossil Free Media. Subsequent messaging tests have shown similar results and similar levels of support. So across the board, a majority of voters want to see polluters pay for the harm they've caused. And it is very, very popular amongst the public, which definitely provides, a win in our sail as we continue to work to pass this measure. Next slide, please. There's also a big growing coalition of support behind this bill, which I know so many folks on this webinar know. You are a part of the coalition. Thank you for your support of this measure and all that folks on this webinar have done in support of the bill. Over 200 organizations across the state have endorsed the bill. That includes climate, environmental justice, health, faith, and youth organizations. Businesses like Seventh Generation have supported the bill and endorsed it. Labor unions like California Nurses Association, the California Federation of Teachers have supported the bill, and dozens of local elected officials across the state support the measure too. And we're also seeing cities now passing resolutions in support of the bill. San Francisco passed a resolution a number of weeks ago, and a resolution was just introduced by the Los Angeles City Council and has started moving there. So we're seeing just more and more growing support, cities endorsing the bill. And, as the support is growing, many campaign supporters, many folks who are on this webinar, and impacted residents from across the state are going to be converging in Sacramento next week for a rally and advocacy day. At this advocacy day, we're going to be doing many of the things that Assemblymember Addis suggested, right? There are going to be climate disaster survivors there meeting with their representatives directly to share stories about how maybe their business was damaged by the Eaton fire or how floods have devastated their communities. Frontline advocates will be there to share about how they're directly impacted by fossil fuel pollution and the increasing costs and harms of climate disasters. And then at the same time, we're working to really raise the urgency for this bill in the media, both at a local and statewide level, and to demonstrate, this outpouring of broad, diverse support for the Climate Superfund. Now is the time to really be pushing hard with the budget conversation heating up in Sacramento. This is a common sense solution to hold polluters accountable, and we've got to get it done. Thank you. I think with that, I'll stop there and hand things back to you, Woody. And yeah, happy to take some questions about how we can do more and what's most strategic.
Sure.
Get into
Thanks,
that.
Jason. Lots of questions coming in. We'll get to them at the end. I want to go right to Claire Brown, who is going to speak to all of us about some of the economic realities revolving around polluters pay and exploding some of the myths, right? Claire is a PhD in economics professor and coordinator of the Climate and Society Center at the University of California, Berkeley. And her bio is in the, will be in the webinar materials. In looking at the time, just want to just move straight to you, Claire. If you are ready to go, hand it off to you. Thank you. And if you're speaking, you ought to,
Okay, I'm
there you
sorry.
go.
I just had to unmute. Thanks everyone for being here. This is such an important bill from an economic viewpoint. And so I wanted to cover that because I could tell that a lot of people here want to learn and hear more about the affordability. And in economics, we of course care about the costs, we care about the benefits, we care about who is paying, who is benefiting. And so we know that people are paying the market price for their energy and for their gas. And that's their private cost, and that's what affects their household budget. But they're also paying with health problems and property damages from the pollution and from global warming. And that's the social cost. And then on top of that, they end up paying higher taxes to deal with the wildfires, floods, droughts, heats from global warming, another social cost, a very large one. And the polluters are passing these social costs to the customers. From an economic viewpoint, we call these external costs that actually the companies should be paying because they're operating costs to the company. But instead, to the extent they can, they always want to pass these costs to consumers because then they can make more money. And as you know, the fossil fuel companies have done great at hiding their damages, and they're really good at misleading the public. So I want to talk to you because my research team at Berkeley cares a lot about the science and the evidence and what's really happening. So what we want to do is make sure that you understand that the way this bill is working is that we look at global emissions with the biggest emitters, and then we determine the damages only in California and the cost from those damages. And as the great author of this bill, Addis mentioned, this is attribution science as well as assessment. And then overall, when you actually get the polluters, the companies, to pay for their operating costs, which include these damages, it not only increases public welfare, but it actually makes the economy work better. So what we want to do is then go directly, and we'll come back and say, does the Superfund fee increase gas prices? I will tell you ahead of time, the answer is no. The fee does not increase gas prices in California. In fact, it actually improves overall affordability because it's reducing costs to the taxpayers of the climate disasters. And so we want to have some budgetary relief from this because otherwise, as taxpayers, we end up paying the cost of the operations, and then we don't end up having funding to actually care and take care of the disaster relief. Also, as Assemblymember Addis mentioned, there's 40% of the revenues going to the frontline communities who have suffered the most to help them recover and pay for improve their well-being. So let's get back to the cost at the pump because that seems to be a really big question. And big oil majors are misleading you. They'll say, of course it's going to cost you more. Of course this is a terrible bill. There's no way that you can afford it. Well, let me tell you from an economic viewpoint, there are three reasons that you cannot use the Superfund fee to increase oil prices. One is there's no impact on global oil prices, and those you can see in the graph. The global price of oil is very volatile, but no company or country actually manipulates that price directly. And the price of crude oil sets the wholesale price of oil, which is then 45% of the pump price. And that's the biggest volatile determinant of what you're paying at the pump. Then number two, we have competition in the retail gas market. We have branded gasoline that a lot of us know about: Chevron, Shell, ExxonMobil, BP, Marathon, and Valero, and Phillips 66 are the oil majors that actually sell gasoline in California. But they're 56% of the market, and the other half of the market is unbranded stations, which includes hypermarkets such as Costco, Gasco. They have lower prices and they keep the competition strong in our retail gas markets because these unbranded stations have lower prices and their share of the market has been growing. So there's competition, and even though branded uh, gas companies would love to increase their prices, they're really held back by the competition from unbranded. And then third, as we've already been heard about, California refineries face legal constraints on their profits. We have 4 oil majors that operate refineries in California: Chevron, Marathon, Valero, Phillips 66, and they also have gas stations. But the law that was mentioned earlier prevents this price gouging by the refineries because you can't use any kind of external fee to actually raise prices because it's not a local operational cost. And so what I want you to be really clear about is that no fee is paid by the local refineries, gas stations, oil wells. There's no local fee being paid by California operations and companies. These fees are paid by the parent multinational companies that cause the global emissions. And that's really important to understand in terms of the economics. So the Superfund fee does not impact the cost, the output, or the jobs in extraction, refineries, or gas stations. It will, though, once we get going and we have the revenues to actually create and help pay for the transition to a clean energy economy and to help pay for these disasters and to help deal with the problem that's been caused by these big emitters. We'll end up getting good jobs in community programs for disaster relief, prevention programs, and transition. And that's really important to understand. We can't just focus on affordability. That's the gas prices. There's so much more going on that's going to impact our pocketbooks, but also our quality of life. So I want to also point out that in refineries, employment is defined not just by domestic demand, but also by exports. And you can see in the graph, and we have local demand for crude oil declining because crude oil now only supplies 24% of the refinery crude input. And that's because our oil fields are old and the extraction is going down. As the extraction goes down and the local demand for crude oil goes down, don't worry, the refineries are increasing exports, and 30% of refinery output is in exports, which is to other states and other countries. And that's how you actually keep employment and capacity at a very high level. So what we want to do is understand that the refineries have a business model that they plan on keeping refining crude oil, but most of it will be coming, as it is already, from other states and other countries. Meanwhile, I want to talk very quickly about the 2 refineries that have announced closures, because as you know, they say, oh, this is because California has too many regulations. It's too hard to do business here. Actually, for both of these refineries, one of their biggest problems is management failures because both of these refineries have really violated Clean Air and Clean Water Acts. And Phillips 66 in Wilmington was indicted with 6 felony counts for dumping oily wastewater. And that happened, the indictment came in 2024. Earlier in 2020, they were already being sued by their Air Quality Management District for persistent toxic emission violations. Let's look at Valero Benicia, which isn't far from where I live. It has persistent toxic emissions. It was fined $81 million in last year because since 2003, they were already emitting illegally emissions without reporting them, with no steps taken to prevent them. And meanwhile, then a fire in May, just May, was caused by equipment failure that increased the harm to the local community, and the refinery is now producing below capacity. But let me just tell you, these are management failures that indicate that these were not well-run refineries. Let's actually quickly ask, does big oil have the ability to pay? Well, Exxon, Chevron, Shell, Total, BP together spent $114 billion in 2023 on dividends and share repurchases so that their shareholders were getting a lot of money, but not the public that was paying for a lot of these profits going to their shareholders. And the public was paying it with, as you know now, their public health and their climate disasters. And so just look at Chevron and ExxonMobil profits, 34 billion in 2024. They're billions of dollars every year. Big oil can afford to pay for this. And my
Claire?
research team at Berkeley, is it time?
Well, I just wanted to say, before you finish, can you turn your camera on so folks can see you? I know you're almost done, but yes, I also need you
Oh,
to.
my camera. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that would be
Oh,
great so we could see your smiling face. But yes, please wrap up because it was actually my fault. I spent too much time on my part, and so if you could wrap up
well,
soon,
I'm
that'd be
ready
great.
to wrap up, but I can't turn on my camera until I quit screen sharing.
Oh, okay.
I'll do it then. I
Okay.
just want to say that I just want to wrap up by talking about this bill helps the polluters pay and not only the public, because we really do need, from an economic viewpoint, to make the market and the economy work better. And one of the things is that how the Superfund revenues are spent will really help the economy. And Jason covered a lot of that. But we really do benefit from having these revenues to help communities throughout the state. And I just want to remind you, consumers are not paying the fee with higher gas prices. And so I just want to thank everybody for being here. I really want us to work together to pass this bill. It's a really important bill. And together, I think we can get it out of the Judiciary Committee, get it to the governor to sign, and get it enforced. So thank you, everyone, for being here. And I'm happy to answer your questions. And let me turn on my camera.
Hopefully we're going to be able to get to them. We're going to get to them after Council President Joe LaCava has made his comments. And I think, thank you so much, Claire. I think you actually answered a lot of the questions that I'm seeing coming into the chat. So very good. And so now, without any further ado, I would like to introduce City of San Diego Council President Joe LaCava. Councilmember LaCava is honored to represent residents and businesses in San Diego District 1, where he is currently serving his second term. He was unanimously elected by his colleagues as the president of the City Council and chairs the Council's Rules Committee, and he continues his work on the Environmental Committee and is the first vice chair on the San Diego Association of Governments Board of Directors. So, thank you so much for being here, Council President LaCava. Take it away. Let's hear a local government perspective. How does this help with local government, or could it help?
There you go. Well, thank you, Woody, and the Climate Center for inviting me to participate in the webinar, and I appreciate the introduction. I also want to give a special thank you to Assemblymember Addis and Senator Menjivar for their leadership on this issue, and also thank Youth versus Oil that has been a tireless voice locally and brought these bills to my attention. As you mentioned, Woody, I am currently the council president of the City of San Diego, and I represent the northwestern corner of our city. As you mentioned, my goal today is to offer a bit of insight in how our efforts to pass these bills can positively impact cities at a local level. I represent several coastal communities, and as mentioned, I am the city's appointee and serve as the vice chair of our local municipal planning organization. And as we've discussed, we're seeing more and more climate disasters and emergencies impact our city and the region. Let me just mention two quick examples here locally. San Diego is the starting point of the low sand rail corridor. It's the second busiest corridor of the country, which runs from San Diego to San Luis Obispo. That corridor provides for intercity passenger service, a crucial freight connection for commerce, and a key route for our military. Our local section is built along coastal bluffs, and despite decades of stability, we are now experiencing multiple bluff collapses that have disrupted passenger and the movement of goods. The frequency and pattern of bluff erosion is caused by storms that are more intense and more frequent, that is directly linked to climate change. At Sandag, we are currently looking at relocating the tracks from the bluffs. As you can imagine, that's no easy feat. We are estimating that realignment project could cost anywhere from $3 to $5 billion, billion with a B. And that's just one project driven by climate impact in our region. And that's why I'm supportive of polluters pay bills, as they can, the polluters pay bills, as they can unlock funding for infrastructure projects and climate resiliency. Another local example, in January 2024, a devastating atmospheric river storm overwhelmed our streams and creeks and flooded underserved neighborhoods within the city. It caused millions of dollars in damage to homes and public infrastructure, upending the lives of residents, most of whom are low income, living in climate equity communities. As a city, we continue to incur serious costs from sea level rise, extreme heat, and inland flooding. And unfortunately, our residents are being forced to cover these expenses. We are always scrambling to find funding and resources to cover the cost of those environmental disasters. I strongly believe we need to remove that burden on local taxpayers and hold fossil fuel companies and polluters accountable. And that's why I want to thank Assemblymember Addis and Senator Menjivar for leading this charge. And I would be remiss to also thank our local Assembly member, Chris Ward, for adding his name as a co-author on the bill. So let's get into the weeds of local government and our climate goals. We'll talk budgets and climate action plans, two elements that are sadly now at odds with each other. San Diego, for example, is facing a $250 million budget deficit. Rising costs for every city-related function have forced us to make difficult choices. Public safety, parks, libraries, employee wages are all essential to keeping a city running. But so is climate and climate resiliency. Like most cities across the state, both large and small, San Diego has passed a landmark climate action plan in 2019, and 2022, we updated that plan with a net zero goal by 2035. San Diego has made tremendous strides to integrate our climate action plan in every department of our city. We were intentional in not having our climate action plan be a set-aside work plan or under only one development or a handful of staff. We wanted to make sure that we had total integration of our climate action plan and priorities on everyday operations and across every department. We have the political will, we have the public support. What we don't have are the resources to fully implement our climate action plan. So much of our budget is being diverted to emergency repairs and emergency response to these climate disasters, when we need resources to take care of those emergencies and our methodical process in implementing our climate action plan and achieving those ambitious goals. As we've heard, the federal administration's threats to eliminate the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act further constrain our ability to expand existing efforts, create new programs, and achieve our climate action goals. And that is why we need our local and state leaders to step up and safeguard our communities from climate change costs and harms. We need to secure a sustainable funding stream for our climate resiliency. Our climate action plan and stormwater infrastructure backlog highlight billions in unmet needs. AB 1243 and SB 684 would ensure that San Diego and other cities receive long-term funding for projects like coastal protection, wildfire preparedness, and green infrastructure without raising local taxes. The Climate Superfund would also help us advance climate equity in under-resourced and underserved communities. Communities like Mario Logan, City Heights, and southeastern San Diego, which are disproportionately affected by extreme heat and poor air quality. The city of San Diego is committed to net zero emissions by 2035, but implementation requires significant investment. On the business side, our economy is dependent on protecting our environment. Our regional economy, especially tourism, the port, and coastal development, is directly at risk from climate disruption as well. We need to protect our environment, our taxpayers, and build a cleaner, sustainable future for California. With that, I want to thank you again for the opportunity to share a local perspective and announce my support for AB 1243 and SB 684. Happy to take any questions, Woody. Thank you very much for the time.
Fantastic. I think that was a great exemplification of what's happening in local government, cities and counties across California. I mean, the things you talk about, not all are coastal communities, so they don't all have bluff erosion, but, extreme heat and the wildfires and flooding and all kinds of episodes. I was going to start, we're now going to start the Q&A. So if all of the panelists could turn their cameras on. And I think also, Mark, if you could drop the call to action link in one more time. I just want to mention that, and I'll mention it one last time at the very end. But please, folks, if you have not gotten hold of that link yet, please do. And when you have a moment, send a note to your representative. The first question I was going to ask was to you, Council President LaCava, but I think you just answered it shortly before. You said you're pledging your support. I
Right.
guess I could further that question and ask: how about your colleagues and you as president? Obviously, some leadership role there. Do you think that San Diego will be having a resolution coming out, or maybe a strongly worded letter, something like that? What are the
There
plans
you go. You're absolutely right, Woody. It starts with the council president, his and my awareness. But I will be bringing a resolution to the council to get, which I'm sure will be heartily endorsed in this conversation.
Very, very good. Very good. Really appreciate that. Well, I want to bring in a question that has come up around, I'm kind of combining a couple of questions here. It's around an effort to reshape the public discussion about this so that it shifts maybe away from some of these alarm bells about gas prices to existing costs of climate impacts, combining that with I want to combine that with this question around the labor community. We don't have a labor representative on today, so we might be a little bit limited in our ability to fully explore this. We do have labor representation on a lot of our webinars and our policy summit, things like that. But really want to open this question up to anyone who'd like to speak to it, which is moving the conversation away from the sort of alarm bells on price spikes to current costs, and how we can have a constructive conversation with all stakeholders, chiefly among them the labor unions. I know there is some labor support, but not, Assemblymember Addis mentioned some labor union support, but not, say, the trades, for example. So what are some of the opportunities there? And I'm just opening it up to any of the panelists who'd like to speak to that. Just sort of raise your hand, I guess.
Well,
go ahead, President LaCava.
I'll start. I'm not a spokesperson for labor, but I think this is one of the more challenging conversations because some of the solutions that we're talking about talks about resetting the economy and the future of jobs. So we want to make sure that we're able to carry forward. And I always like to speak to the idea that all the things that we're talking about that are very ambitious will not happen overnight. This will be a transition to a more sustainable future. And we need to work with, labor unions are there to protect their members, to have good paying jobs that are reliable, and make sure that employers are not taking advantage of them. So we will bring them into the conversation. Sometimes I know there's so many bills that are happening at the state level. I think this is really the right time for us locally and statewide to really bring this one to their attention and help them understand the value to their members and to their long-term future.
Great point. Yeah, and in my own experience working with sort of at the local level with the local labor community can quite often be productive and have some success. And so I see your hand, Claire. Go ahead. Find that mute button.
As a labor economist, who became a climate scientist economist, I worked a lot with unions, and one of the biggest problems is that big oil really tells their workers that you're going to lose your job, and when you do, all you can do is flip burgers. That is it. And so fear is enormously important in this discussion. And I think that one of the ways that we really have to keep emphasizing is that we're creating clean, good jobs. And we're going to ensure that they have to pay prevailing wage, because anytime there's state funds involved, you can then have criteria for what the employer must do. And I think it's really important that we keep emphasizing that, because we don't want to create bad paying jobs or more unsafe jobs and so forth. So I think that even if we can't say for each worker that loses a job, we have this job waiting for you, I think it's really important for the communities as well as for the workers to make sure we are growing good, clean jobs that are paying decent wages and taking care of people, as well as ensuring the communities that we're also going to be working on community development so that as the revenues decline from refineries and extraction, that in fact we do have a way to help pay and replenish our community budgets. But of course, the council president can tell you and has told us a lot more about that.
Thank you, Claire. Yeah, you're speaking to a question that comes to us quite frequently. We're talking about phasing out fossil fuels, and our labor friends have said, well, what are we phasing in, right? And so I'll do an early plug for a webinar we're going to do on July 31st on advancing geothermal energy in California, which has promise for labor with some high quality, long-term high quality jobs, that kind of thing. So that's at least one example of a possibility for a really high road employment for former oil and gas industry workers. I'd like to get to a different question, unless you wanted to chime in on anything on that, Jason, on that question around the building the positive, public conversation, getting away from the fear mongering.
Yeah, I mean, I would just echo what others said. I think telling the story of the ways that this bill can support workers is really, really important. There are all sorts of types of workers who are on the front lines of climate disasters. Public sector workers, essential workers, first responders, and part of the funding that would be raised through this bill could be directly allocated to programs that support those workers. Thinking about teachers, childcare providers who are like protecting their kids when wildfires hit or dealing with extreme heat. And so I think that's an important story for us to continue to tell.
Good. Okay, thank you. And my next question is probably going to go to you as well, Jason. Um, and I know I don't think you're an attorney, but it's a sort of a legal-ish question, and I know that I think that the New York and Vermont bills are currently in litigation. There's a question here around the viability of the legislation. Let's assume that it passes through, gets signed by the governor, pretty much as it is with the core policy. What are its is there anything you can say about what the expectation is if it faces a court challenge, when it faces a court challenge?
Yes, I would just say I would just lift up Christina, my colleague, the comment that she put in the chat that the Climate Superfund Act is modeled on existing federal law, CERCLA, the Federal Environmental Cleanup Law, as well as California's Childhood Lead Poisoning and Prevention Act, which has stood up to legal challenges. And what that bill does is similar. So the Childhood Lead Poisoning Prevention Act required the paint companies to pay a fee because they had lead in their product and that caused harm to children. And so they had to pay a fee, it went into a special fund, and then that special fund was used for programs to prevent kids from being poisoned by lead. So very similar model. So there's strong federal and state precedent for this.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you, Christina Scringe of Center for Biological Diversity. And did anyone else, either you, Claire, or you, Council President, would like to chime in on that one?
No, I mean, I think litigation is a way of life, and we just have to keep pushing forward and not be intimidated.
Yeah, that's why I had to change that if to a when, right? Um, so, um, so many questions coming in. I guess there's sort of a nuts and bolts question we could look at, which is a question around, the bill. This is the beginning of a 2-year session, so the bill could go into 2026. What are some of the strategies, maybe? And maybe this is again, Jason, mostly for you. Is it looking like this is going to be a push for getting it across the finish line in 25? I would think that's probably the priority, but is there some strategy to maybe work it so that it would be a bill that gets across the finish line in 26 instead?
I will say that the priority is to get the bill passed this year. That is what we are working so hard to do. Both authors, Assembly Member Addis and Senator Menjivar, are strongly committed to the bill. And so we're going to keep pushing. We need to keep pushing. We need to keep building support. We need to demonstrate that support to the legislators who are on the fence about this bill. And so continuing to push with some of the Assembly and Senate judiciary members who have not yet committed to support the bill is incredibly important. We need to continue to make the case to the budget chairs as well as Assembly and Senate leadership that this bill really needs to be prioritized. It is a solution that can help address California's budget problem. We need urgent solutions now. That problem is only likely to get worse, and so now is the time. Yeah, that's the plan. And if we're in a situation where we need to explore other options, we'll do that with the authors and the sponsoring organizations and so many folks in the coalition. Yeah, thanks for that question, Woody.
I kind of figured that would be your answer, though. Yes, and Climate Center is committed to pushing for it for this year too. Claire, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to say too, in terms of urgency, not only do we need urgency from a climate perspective, from an economic perspective, we're making an investment in the state, in the long-term viability of the economy and in people's health. And everybody knows that they've had Econ 1. If you make an investment, the sooner you make it, the more quickly you get returns and the lower the cost in the future will be. And so it's really important economically from a fiscal viewpoint and an efficiency viewpoint to actually get this going now, get the revenues flowing in and make the investments that we need.
Very good. Council President LaCava, did you want to add anything?
No, I think they said it very well. Like you said, that sense of urgency. This was the bill that we should have passed yesterday. And so we are where we are today. So let's keep pushing forward and get it done.
Yeah, it does seem like something that, anyway, that should have been done a long time ago. A question that I think is really mostly for you, Claire, which is, can you speak a little bit more about climate attribution science? I know you're not a climate scientist per se, but you mentioned it, we mentioned it, and the question is around, it's fairly new, and it is. And the question is, does it have, is there a sense that it has enough credibility to help make the case here? And anyone can respond to that, but I wanted to start with you, Dr. Brown.
Oh, this it's extremely important, and it's based upon the time proven way of how to do science, how to show causation, how to show evaluation, and to tie the pollution to actually to companies, and to show what would have happened if they hadn't been polluting and what is happening now that they did pollute. It's based upon good science, and it's been now we have studies. We've had at least 3 studies now published and reviewed, articles, and I don't know any climate scientist who doesn't think that it's, first of all, path breaking. It's absolutely critical. And then finally, it allows the legal pathway to showing, oh, what do? We know how to measure emissions globally. Now, how do we take it down to the company level, which we can do? And now we can take it down to the state level of California for damages. What we have to do next, though, is assessment. So we're way ahead on attribution, and that's critical. That's the foundation. And then Cal EPA, according to this bill, will hire and do the modeling necessary for putting value or cost onto the actual damages. And then that will allow us to move forward to set up the fees.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Jason, did you want to add anything to that? No, you're good? No. Council President LaCava, a question for you. Yeah. Are you engaged at this time with any other cities, maybe in San Diego County or anywhere else, in discussion with other local governments about endorsing? And yeah, so just that's the question basically.
Great question. And the candid answer is no. We're actually just getting our kind of feed into this now. And one of the reasons I accepted the invitation to be on the webinar to start that conversation, and to start bringing this to other jurisdictions, and build that local support. That's one of the things I was hearing, is that we really need more of the local jurisdictions, the ones that are really impacted, their bottom line in terms of the impacts of climate change and climate disasters going forward. So I hope they use this as a stepping stone to start that larger conversation.
Right
Great.
on. Yeah. Yeah. I think if San Diego does it, that would inspire
Yeah.
some of the other smaller cities and whatnot in San Diego County to do it. This question, I don't think it relates, but there have been there's been actually for quite a while now some look and some pilot programs around eliminating the state gas taxes and switching over to a road usage charge type of tax, because EVs don't use gas, so gas tax revenues are going down. The question is around whether this bill would have any effect on that proposed switch. I don't think so. I don't think there's some relevance to that. But does anyone here, Claire, was that your hand? Did you want to say something? Oh, no?
That was
Anybody
me.
have?
I don't see any economic reason that there would be any relationship happening. But that's just economic.
I mean,
Politically, hey.
my own answer to that was there are different dimensions of the transition, and that's one of the places where you're going to need to change how an existing revenue stream is going to go away. What's the opportunity for filling that gap? And a road usage charge, which is demonstrable. There are places where it's already implemented where that can work. So I think, and this, for folks that don't know, it's to, instead of a tax on gasoline to pay for road upkeep and whatnot, it is a charge that drivers are pay for based on mileage, how much you drive, how much you use the road. So a road usage charge. Anyone else have any thought on that one? I'm not seeing hands
Yeah.
go up. Okay. Let's see. Yeah.
Woody, we're reaching time here.
Oh, 11:26. Yeah. Any closing comments from any of you? Because then I just have, thank you, Mark. Because then I just have a couple of closing comments.
Well, I'll just quickly close by thanking you, Woody, and the Climate Center for arranging the webinar and inviting us. And to the sponsors of the bill, we really appreciate your leadership and what it's going to take to drive this down to the governor's desk. So thank you all.
And thank you for being here.
Yeah, I thank everyone and also just add thank you, Climate Center, for reminding us continually here to take action and how to take action, because that's so critical for us to join together to really push on this bill.
Same. Yeah. Thank you, Climate Center. Thank you to everyone who came. I know many of you are like deeply engaged in this work. Thank you for all you're doing to help pass this bill. And thank you, Council President LaCava. Your support is just so appreciated, valued, and important.
Well, thank you, Jason and Claire, for your good work every day.
Thanks all, and also thank you to Assemblymember Addis for joining us today. Really appreciated her presence. So, yeah, Mark, if you could put the call to action back up on the screen. Once again, my slides seem to have just vanished from my screen. So if you could put that up, that would be great. And folks, Mark will also be dropping the the link into the chat. So it's either the QR code or the link, your choice. And I just want folks to know that the recording of this webinar and all of the materials, the slides, and the chat, we saved the chat will be included. And I think all the questions too, if your question, we didn't get to your question, we can follow up and answer your question. So presenters, you might be hearing from us if there's a question specifically that they wanted to hear from you about. So I think we got to a lot of them. Either, questions that were posed were answered in your presentations, and we did get to quite a number of them. So I feel good about that. And it is 11:29. So if there, Mark, can you put the QR code up there? Maybe you can't.
I did drop the link to the
Oh,
call to action.
in the chat. Okay,
Yep.
let me get it up there then. Here it is, folks. Oh, I don't see it.
There's other people that have mentioned. I'll do it one more time.
Oh, got it. I got it.
There you go. Thank you all.